All right, thank you as always for all of you regulars tuning in for another This Week in Crypto. If you're new, thank you so much for checking us out and tapping into our market recap of what we've seen over the past week in terms of sentiments metrics and what we see in the future. We do not give investment advice on these kinds of shows, but we absolutely do our best to navigate the metrics that we have to kind of compare what we're seeing now to some of what we've seen in history that looks similar to get an idea of what the most likely direction is for a lot of cryptos, top caps, mid caps, and even small caps. We cover over 4,300 different coins now, which is a pretty astounding number to say. I want to start off by checking out what we saw over the past week in terms of just raw price returns. And for Bitcoin, it did eke out just a slight profit, going up about 1.6%, gaining that 110K coveted price mark once again, but didn't really move much. You can see Ethereum dropped a little, still hovering just a little below 4,000 at 38.85 right now. And then we got Binance Coin, which really hasn't moved since its huge ascension at the beginning of the month. XRP did jump up a bit, got up above 250 before coming back down. It's now sitting at 241, but still up about 2% over the past week. Solana up about 3.5% over the past week as it tries to jump back above $200. We've got Dogecoin as a slight gainer over here at 3.25%. Chainlink was one of the bigger stories. Excuse me, Hyperliquid was one of the bigger stories, up 7.5%. Chainlink actually is right next to it. It did have a slight divergence at the beginning of the week, but ended up retracing, which is quite interesting. Hyperliquid, though, nearing $40 as it continues its ascension. Litecoin up a little over 3%. Monero, so you'll notice Monero up 10%, Zcash up 22%. These are two of the very, very large privacy coins that have been gaining a lot of traction as of late. Having a very good year overall relative to just the regular altcoin market overall. And then you see Athena over here. They've been doing a lot of good things. I won't get into it because I just wrote a long form insight about it, which you should be able to check out. I'll give you a link in this video so you can take a look at that. You can see Pepe over here, almost up 2%, barely moving. Meme Core, a big gainer at plus 16% or so. But overall, despite Bitcoin eking out a profit, it's interesting to see the market cap actually down 2.7%. So it did drop just a bit. The screener volume also dropped about 30% as we continue to see less and less trading going on for a few reasons. I think the main thing is, we've had some back and forth with Trump talking to Xi from China about tariffs and trade modifications and all sorts of things. So people aren't quite sure what's going on between them. Also, we have the new thing going on with the U.S. and Russia right now, where Trump is strongly trying to get Putin to end the war with Ukraine. I actually want to skip ahead a little bit and look at a little more about that. Okay, so we have the Russian sanctions. The U.S. imposed sanctions on Russia's largest oil companies, which was very directly aimed to pressure Moscow to end the Ukraine war. It's actually already led India and China to reduce or halt their Russian oil imports, and that's pushed oil prices up. But it does create tension, right? We don't want the largest countries in the world at odds. And, by mass, we're talking about Russia, China, and US, the three largest, in terms of not just mass, but their overall impact on the rest of the world. These are superpowers in the globe that are just causing concern because of the tensions going on between Trump and each of them. I put a chart together so we could actually see some of the three major stories. I mentioned Trump and Russia, not getting too much discussion relative to Trump and China, which really peaked a couple of weeks ago here when he temporarily threatened tariffs. Then he changed his mind and the markets kind of went up and down. You saw one more development here and we've gone up ever since. But then the latest has been Trump's pardon with CZ, who was sentenced in 2023 for money laundering. And his pardon by President Trump has been a huge story. And so far, the market has reacted positively because for the most part, the crypto community has viewed CZ as a bit of a hero for how he's changed crypto, regardless of your opinion. What you should be taking into account is what the crowd thinks about stuff like this. So the crowd tends to be scared when it comes to discussions about Trump and China or Trump and Russia, even though you barely see the discussions about Trump and Russia. I'm pretty sure that'll get higher because it's still kind of a developing story. But they get very excited if it's about CZ and a potential pardon and him being free, because it signals to other crypto innovators that they can innovate safely without, repercussions, or at least a little less risk than they thought before, because one of the key figureheads over the last decade is now pardoned. Going back to some other things I prepared here. So speaking of the crowd and their reactions right now, one thing that I'm always keeping track of is the overall mentions of Bitcoin in relation to under 100K prices versus over 150K prices. Obviously, Bitcoin's been between 100 and 150K for quite a while. And by doing it this way, we can measure the fear when they're mentioning and kind of predicting low prices, or the greed when they're mentioning and predicting high prices. And you can see over here, back on October 17th, what do you know, right when the prices bottomed out, this was when retail was speculating for 50K to 100K Bitcoin and getting Bitcoin on a discount when it keeps on going down, because that's what they thought the price would do here. And sure enough, it bounces. And yes, we normally are getting more speculation toward higher prices. This is the normal bullish bias that you're going to see across social media. But there really hasn't been anything to indicate that the crowd is getting overly fearful. You know, the ratio here is a little closer than you would want, but I'm not too concerned about it. It's been mostly just a sea of red as the crowd is anticipating that we continue to rebound and get higher and higher. Now, the question is, are they getting too greedy? Well, we have a really good measurement here where we can look at the overall ratio of all of the positive comments across crypto social media. That's including X, Reddit, Telegram, 4chan, Bitcoin Talk, and Farcaster. And then we're looking at all the negative comments, and we're basically just dividing straight up all the bullish ones where people are talking about Lambos versus all of the bearish ones where people are saying, see you back at 50K, see you at the end of this dip, all the kind of stuff that tells our algorithms that the crowd is getting pessimistic. So as you might suspect, when you see really high bars like this, this was the highest over the past 3 months, where there's a ton of bullish sentiment compared to bearish sentiment. That's when prices top. And then we go down, and depending how far down, that's when the crowd really starts to capitulate. And just as you would suspect, right when he announced or threatened the tariffs on China that only lasted a couple days, that's when the crowd got extremely fearful. There were actually 4 bearish comments for every 3 bullish comments. And that's really, really rare. We've only seen that a handful of times each year since Bitcoin started existing. So when that happened, clear sign of a bottom. You can see this sliver over here, the price dropping all the way down. And then we bounced. And ever since this latest dip, where we got pretty scarily down close to that same area, around 104. I know this looks higher, but if I zoomed in, I'm not going to bother, but it actually went a little below 103K, which was technically a little higher or a little lower than what we saw on the 17th. But anyways, the price has bounced since, and look how the sentiment is starting to get a little bit scary bullish right now, especially right now. So we're seeing about 1.52 bullish comments for every one bearish comment, a little higher than we'd want to be. That's like about a 3-to-2 ratio or so. And generally, if I draw a line here, generally when we get to this point, you can see maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 or 8 other instances. I know these were big blocks of them. That's when it gets really dicey. But anytime we get these big high ones, that's when it starts to get a little volatile. This was a clear signal. This was a clear signal when people were trying to buy the dip after the then all-time high back in mid-August. They got punished and we kept going down. So long story short, we need to see the crowd get a little more cautious than they are right now. They're getting pretty confident thinking that this was the bottom here and now it's just a big party back up to 120K. And if the crowd thinks that, the outcome is less likely to happen. Now, I didn't just prepare Bitcoin. I also pulled up Ethereum, which looks quite neutral. Not much to say right now. It's been trading at a pretty tight range. It actually did get above 4,000 again just a couple days ago, but quickly fell back down, sitting just under 3,900 now. Sentiment looks to be about average if I were to draw a line here, just ballparking. I mean, this is about the median sentiment we've seen, and we're about right there right now. So not anything too crazy. Unlike BNB, which is seeing just sky high positive sentiment right now. If you look at the top left of my screen while I'm highlighting the current day, you're seeing that right. There's 10.02 positive comments for every one negative comment. And undoubtedly, the reason is CZ's pardon. And CZ is still kind of the face of Binance, even though he hasn't been with Binance for a couple of years. It's so interesting. But BNB gets an interesting boost when the former figurehead of Binance gets pardoned and he's a free man because people start to speculate. Maybe he'll have some involvement or bigger involvement with Binance soon, and that can cause a lot of new developments. XRP also kind of like Ethereum, pretty neutral. It's been, I know from the XRP community, they're doing that meme where they're poking the coin with the stick saying, come on, do something. Because XRP has been hemorrhaging for quite a while. If we go back to this top here on October 3rd, 20 days ago, it's dropped about 21% in price. It was looking a little encouraging, like it was starting to bounce on the 21st, but it's kind of retraced along with the markets and really hasn't had too many isolated breakouts. If we go back 6 months, we can see this. If we go back, should be right. Yep. So this was the huge rally back here in July. One may argue that because we saw such an enormous rally, we're still kind of seeing the regression to the mean on that until things normalize again. If I were to add on the MVRV, just to give an idea of the long-term profits, it's interesting. It actually just went back. I'll take everything else off. It just went back below negative. So you can see how high it was. The average wallets in mid-July were up 73% on the long-term scale. And it stayed in positive range all the way until this big flash crash that affected all of crypto on the 10th. And it's kind of gone above and below, but it's a good sign that it's essentially back at zero now. That means from a long-term perspective, XRP has reset enough with this long downswing that there's justification for prices to start swinging back up again. So take that for what you will. ETFs. So I wanted to point out the fact that there's been quite a few outflows that really started right when Trump started talking about the tariffs with China, and people aren't convinced that that chapter just closed 2 days later. There's still a lot of speculation that there could be something going on that causes a massive wave of increased prices in terms of imports and exports between the US and the rest of the world. And we saw what happened in April when that happened. People got terrified and, the S&P 500 tanked, gold tanked, everything tanked before they quickly rebound when Trump eased up on it in later April. But yeah, other than this day, we've seen mostly outflows going back the last couple of weeks here. And that's not necessarily a bad sign, as we've seen. Some of the biggest inflows have actually marked the top, like this one about 17 days ago. And this one here too, there's been plenty. This one was a perfect top. So this is starting to function more like a FOMO and FUD indicator, where you see a lot of inflows and that immediately halts the rallies. And then you see a lot of outflows and then you get bounces. So it's more retail driven than you may think. But I would keep an eye on the ETF inflow and outflow data. It's going to be a major teller as time goes on. Also, we need to point out the fact that the FOMC meeting is now 4 days away from beginning. Starting on the 28th, we are going to be finding out whether the government is going to cut rates by another 25 BPS. It appears that the poly market and the crowd expectation is overwhelmingly expecting another cut and even one more cut before the year ends. So assuming that comes to fruition, we should see a little boost in the markets, but considering that there might be a little bit of that expectation already baked in, don't be surprised if there's less of a reaction than you may think. You'll start to see a lot more talk, just like we saw in September here, especially a lot more talk right before the FOMC meeting starts next week. So keep paying attention to that. Moving on to whales. We always like to start by checking out the 10 to 10K BTC wallets and what they're doing. And it appears that they've actually been on a slight profit-taking tear going back the last 11 days. The 10 to 10K BTC wallets have collectively dropped about 18,863 Bitcoin. It doesn't happen often that they're actually moving down, but right now, the most similar we can look at is a couple weeks after the all-time high in August, we saw them dump about 18K here in these 3 days, and prices did end up dumping thereafter. So this is a bit of a leading indicator. I'm hoping they kind of right the ship. They're not dumping aggressively, but it's a little bit of each day, it seems. And that can have a negative impact because the large key stakeholders always have a lot to do with where markets go next. Now, I also have this line. This is the smallest wallets, basically any wallet with coins in it that's under 0.01 BTC. And the supply held is going up a tad. I actually want to look at the amount of coins because it's a little more telling to me. I'll just take that off. So this blue line here shows that the smallest wallets over the past 2.5 weeks or so have added about 0.8% collectively to their wallets. It may not sound like much, it's just 383 coins, but generally they're kind of an inverse indicator. You can see how like they were accumulating aggressively, trying to buy the dip after the August all-time high, and they got punished until they started to take profit. And then when they took profit, prices started to go up. So they're kind of an inverse indicator. This green line's supposed to be a positive indicator, a good correlation with where prices go next. And then the yellow is the guys in the middle. So 0.01 to 10 BTC. And they've been dumping consistently, at least over the past 3 months. If we go back a year, yeah, it's been rare that the 0.01 to 10 crowd is even accumulating. Like this was their one big accumulation, and they got destroyed when they did that because we saw a huge dump in late February. So they've been kind of an inverse indicator too. Let me just hide these and just to, kind of ballpark, I'll make it easier. I'll make the price align for a minute. So if you just look since like right here, look at how the yellow line's been going down. They start to go up a little and then the price crashes. But there is a bit of an inverse indicator too, arguably as much as the really small ones. So all the wallets below 10 consistently get it wrong. And, there's a lot of sharks and what they call dolphins in that 1 to 10 BTC range where it's pretty, intelligent traders who know what they're doing, but they've still kind of been on the wrong side of a lot of this swing trading, at least in 2025, because the 10 to 10K line is just controlling so much of the overall supply, holding over 68.5% now of all of the Bitcoin. But yeah, they've been dropping like crazy. The 0.01 to 10 BTC crowd. They did hold 17.3% of the supply. Now it's on the verge of falling below 17. That's a big deal in such a short amount of time. Looking at some other major metrics for Bitcoin, you can see the big spike in transaction volume that happened in the week following Trump's temporary tariff threats, but it's kind of calmed down. Overall utility, active addresses are on a very mild decline. It's nothing too concerning. Circulation is looking about flat, and network growth here is also about flat. So utility on the network looks fine. And then we talked about MVRV for XRP. Now let's take a look for Bitcoin really quick, because the MVRV for Bitcoin is going to control all of crypto to an extent. And we want to see negative values because that helps justify that we could be able to bounce. And on the 30-day side, we do see that traders active in the past 30 days are down about 3.2% on average, meaning that if you bought right now, you'd be doing so at less risk than usual, because usual is 0% and we're in the negative range. So you have some justification to add on or buy the dip based on this metric alone, not investment advice, but generally you see the big dips and how they've correlated with a lot of the bottoms, the perfect times to buy. So especially if it starts to get even lower, like below 10%, that's what we consider an opportunity zone, where you can really start to dip your toes in with confidence and go against all of the crowd pain that's going on. Meanwhile, the long-term 365-day MVRV for Bitcoin is still just above zero at plus 5%. I would mostly shrug this off because 5% for a long period of time is almost even. We need a wider range. We look at like plus 30% or above as a danger zone because there's too much profit, or minus 30% or below as an opportunity zone. It takes a wider scale for an opportunity or a danger zone to really form, unlike 30-day, which is more like plus 10%, minus 10%. So this is essentially break even, just slightly above zero still. Overall, though, this paints a nice picture that you certainly wouldn't be buying at a time when traders are heavily in profit, and that's usually the time you want to avoid. Okay, we went, actually, I do want to touch on a few of these topics. So we talked about Trump pardoning CZ. That's still leading the overall stories that are trending across social media, even though it's been going on for about a little over 24 hours now. The Russia sanctions are quite fresh at the time of this recording. So that's number two. I expect this might overtake for number one at some point soon, especially if further stories come out. We'll see how secretive they all are in terms of negotiations about this stuff. There was a House meeting on Thursday between Trump and Xi. We don't know a ton yet. Maybe some of you do. I have not seen any big mainstream news reporting on it other than the fact that they've met. But they are aiming to ease the escalating trade tensions, right? So the next big report we hear from either the US or China about how that meeting went is going to have, I guarantee it, an impact on whether crypto and the stocks go up or down temporarily. There will be a reaction to whatever the next piece of news is. Pump warning ahead. So this is amid rumors of a US-China trade deal and Trump's upcoming meeting with Xi. So obviously people are optimistic about the discussion and hoping that a trade deal will take place, but it's rumors, you can clearly see here, and we need confirmation. So be careful about pumps that happen based on a rumor, because many of you have heard the saying, buy the rumor, sell the news. You want to be sure that something comes to fruition before hopping on the train and assuming it's a done deal, literally a done deal. Meteora launched spot trading on multiple platforms with a major airdrop. So if you've been following that story, you know, that could be something to keep an eye on for some of you smaller altcoin traders out there. And I won't go through all 10 of these, but just remember, you can go through the trending stories anytime you'd like. You've also got the trending words here, which you should see a lot of overlap, like CZ, she, yep. Oh, actually, that's weird. Went to trending stories again. Yeah, so we see that pardoned is the #1 trending word right now. And Trump, with so many different topics going on with him being involved, he's up there right now too, as he has been a lot in 2025. So yeah, you can check out some additional information that might not always overlap with the trending stories on that trending words page. And then the trending coins, for those interested. For the really small coins, you can use this table over here to just see the overall social dominance percentage jumps. And you've got Frax and Frax share way up there at the top. And then GameStop continues to be the #1 trending coin, with Meteora, as we saw with the airdrop news, at #2 right now. Nano trending, kind of an OG coin. And it seems to do with the announcement around Ledger's hardware wallets, including the new Ledger Nano Gen 5 device. Aave here at #4. This appears to be related to the acquisition that Aave Labs had of Stable Finance. So they have an upcoming release of Aave v4, which has plenty of new features being introduced. And then we have Cardano here. I know we have many Cardano fans who are always interested. It's trending due to extensive discussions about the Cardano blockchain, platform security, uptime, and role in decentralized finance on Reddit. So there seems to be some debate going on about the actual functionality and unique features related to Cardano. There's also mentions in relation to transaction milestones, market movements, and the inclusion in a new crypto ETF by T. Rowe Price. So that's exciting, not just for Cardano, but a handful of other coins as well. Last but not least, I just wanted to look at the Whale Watcher. I refreshed this already, so this is what we're currently seeing. 2 big Aether transactions, both $2.3 million in value. We have Layer Zero underneath, Athena, then even more Aether. So if you're interested in some major volatility, look at some of the coins here that have made huge whale transactions, not just in general, but this specifically is showing whale transactions being moved to centralized exchanges, which implies there could be some downside pressure coming up due to some whales looking to sell off. Doesn't always mean they're trying to sell off just because they move coins to exchanges, but it's generally more bad news than good for a coin if you see a major amount of coins suddenly move to centralized exchanges, especially when it's of $1 million or more, as this dashboard is set up to report. So take a look at that Whale Watcher dashboard as well. It's free, just like the ETF dashboard is that I showed earlier. There's a lot of free things. And of course, you can open up a trial on Santiment and get 2 free weeks to take a look at everything I'm showing here today. So you don't just have to be updated by me once a week. You can do the research yourself and look for well over 4,000 coins instead of just the top caps and the major stories that I went over today. So hope this was helpful, guys. As always, really appreciate you checking us out, supporting us, giving us that thumbs up. As silly as it sounds, it does make a big difference, and having you be a subscriber makes a big difference, and you resharing our videos makes a big difference. So thank you so much for that, and wishing you all a pleasant weekend in the meantime. Expect more posts in the next 24 hours as we monitor the markets, and you'll see plenty of insights posted on our page and our X, our Telegram, and our YouTube page. Cheers for now. See you guys soon.